Okay. So anyway, so the blocks, they're multiples of each other. There's the bigger one, the half size, the quarter size. There were even some smaller, I think. So sometimes I would go into a classroom and I would see the teacher did organize the blocks, but they were put, let's pretend that this is the block, my cell phone is a block. So rather than being put this way, they'd be put this way. And so there's no way that the child could see the relationships of the different sizes. Why is it important to see the relationships of the sizes? Well, like Oscar's building train tracks, and he has the big block, the big block. Up, there's no more big blocks. All right, what is he going to do? He'll start figuring out that two of those half-size blocks will be the same size as the big one. So there's mathematical thinking going on. So blocks really are like, yeah, there's math there, right? There's another aspect of math is the symmetry. Remember that picture that I showed of this amazing picture of this haunted house that these children worked on for a week, and it was totally symmetrical? Well, that's an extreme case of it, but really, if you look at what children are doing, they really do start like creating symmetry in their blocks. Some of it just because of balance, getting things to balance. Balance is another thing. There's like math in terms of balancing, science in terms of the weight of the blocks. Understand, like getting a sense of that weight. So there's just so much that there's so much. It's such a it's I love Carolyn Pratt for creating these wonderful blocks. And in my class, I would we had like I forgot what you call it. At the beginning of the year, like we get a certain amount of money to not a little bit, but just a little bit, but we get some money to spend for our classroom. Or whenever I got money, I put it into blocks. So I would get different shapes, and so they would have more variety. As the year went on. So I had a really nice collection of blocks in my classroom because as the years went on, I would build this up. And there's certain things that are like important, like if your block center is too small, all right, if it's too small, blocks are going to get knocked over, right? Because their bodies, they don't have a sense yet. Many of the children don't have a sense yet of the spatial parts of their body, and I'm just looking to make sure that this is working. Yes. And I'm just going to check this to make sure everything is as it should be. Hang on here. Okay, there. So it has to have enough room. So what happens if you don't have enough space to have like 4 or 5 children in the block area? Then you have to limit it to a smaller group of children that can build in that area. There are certain things that I've put in the book here that I've learned as the years went on. One thing is that it's helpful to have your bookcase, your shelves for the blocks on 2 sides, all right? And to have the same blocks, the same variety of blocks in both shelves. So that way children aren't climbing over each other to get the blocks that they need. It's on both sides, and they can access it on either side. That's helpful. Another thing that is helpful is with some tape, to maybe think about a space between the shelves and the building area, and leave some space and put some tape there, so that the idea is the tape gives a signal that you don't build onto there. Because what I found, I don't know if you find this, but over the years, children, they do love to build onto the shelves, like lean it on, be part of it. But then it gets knocked over again because somebody's trying to get the block and they can't get the block that way, and it gets left. And then there's a whole skadoodle going on for that. So I found that was helpful if I would put that signal up there. So another thing is to not start with too much. I mean, this is the basic materials that you would have at the beginning of the year. Like I didn't put out cars and people and animals and dollhouse furniture or whatever into my block area at the beginning of the year. I just had the blocks, and I had some books that were like, maybe some inspiring books with some things that, like pictures of farms or pictures of the city or whatever, some pictures up on that I put up. Um, and that's kind of how I would start, the year like that. Because what I found is if I put out other things, then they didn't yet play with the blocks yet. They played with the cars, or they played with and I wanted them to get used to playing using the blocks. Then as I saw them starting to build more, then I would add things. Then I would slowly add things. And some of them are like animals and cars, and some are things like rulers or tape measures or maps or um, 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 yeah, things like that. So that would add to that would add to their building. And I was just going to say something there. Oh yeah. So how would I start? How do I start? Is usually I would begin by just doing a class activity with the blocks. All right. So either in the block center, if it was big enough for the whole class to sit there, usually it wasn't. And so we would do this on the rug where our meeting was. All right. And I would give every child a chance to go and get a block. All right. Any kind of block that they want. Did I tell you this before? I'm not sure. Okay, good. So it could be a triangle block. It could be like one of the long blocks, any kind they want, just one block. Come back to the rug, and I would have one. And we'd all put our blocks in back of us because nobody could listen or pay attention if the block was in their hand. So the block would be in back of them. All right. And then I'd say, I'm going to start our building. All right. And I would take my block and put it in the middle, and I'd think about it. I didn't know if I wanted to stand up like this or maybe go sideways. I do my thinking out loud. Oh, I'm going to put it like this. All right. I'm going to put it just like this, like that. And then I'd say, all right, Mary, let's see what kind of block you have. All right. And Mary would take her block out, and they'd say, Mary, you can put your block any way you want, but there's one rule. It has to touch another block. So right now it has to touch my block some way. It could be on top of it. It could be next to it. It could be pointing together, but it has to touch. All right. So then Mary would go up and figure out and I would say, oh, let's see what she's going to be doing. I wonder where Mary's going to put her block up over there. Mary, that looks making me think of a boat, the way it's like standing, your triangle is standing on top of looks a little bit like the sail of a boat. I wonder if it's going to keep looking like a boat or if something's going to change. And I'd call the next child, and we would keep going until we had a structure, but talking about it as we went, and so that would be the first time. If I was lucky enough to have a para or a student teacher in the room, taking pictures as it went. So we literally have almost like I could put it up the next day, like the development of what we made that first day. And my block center was not open yet. This is just something we were doing. And then one by one, children would go and they find the place where the block belongs. Look at the picture, look at your block, see where it goes. All right, come back again. And then we talk about it a little bit. Right. Then the next day we do it again. All right, we would do it again. And actually, if I did it more than twice, the third time, I might actually give them paper at the end. All right, maybe with a clipboard, and ask them if they want to draw a picture of the blocks that they see of what we made together, you know. You have to know your class then, if your class is ready to do something like that or not. And then I would say, we did such incredible things when we built together. Tomorrow the Block Center is going to be open for choice time. I'm wondering, it'll be interesting to see if any of you decide to build something together. All right. I'm not saying you must build something together, but I'm saying it would be interesting to see if you would build something together. So then if I did see, like, say, two children are working on something together, I might photograph it and share it with the class, or I might just have them, like at our meeting afterwards, and I remember I said that choice time, you start with a little focus lesson and end with a share meeting. And the share meeting, I might use that as a share meeting. I went into the block area and I saw Carlos and Jimmy building something together. It was really so interesting to watch. Carlos and Jimmy, come up here. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about it. What were you guys working on together? Did you have an idea, or were you just kind of fooling around with it? Or did you have an idea of what you were going to be making? And I'd say to the children, listen carefully, because you might want to ask them some questions. All right. But that's how I got started. That's how I would introduce the blocks, because there are children who have blocks at home. And then there are children who've never used blocks, or there's children who've used blocks in like a nursery school. So they're all at all different levels and places in terms of it. Some children are very intimidated by the blocks. I remember my daughter was that way. She was sort of intimidated by these big blocks, but having the opportunity to actually hold it in this thing, it maybe helps to get over some of that anxiety about using the blocks, right? I'm going to stop a moment. So like some of your comments or thoughts, all right? Maybe just if you have some, just jot it down, right? And I'll look at the chat, or you could just call out.
Do you have any favorite books that you could suggest about putting in the block area? Because I've suggested that to some of our teachers before, and that's the question I always get. Well, tell me a list of books.
Yeah. You mean for the children?
Yes, like when you're starting the Block Center.
Yeah, I didn't have, I never had like specific, I mean, there are books about like just blocks, a child with blocks or something like that, but I found it better if I had a book that had pictures of interesting buildings. I truly don't have names of the books. I would have maybe one or two books that had pictures of farms, space, all right, a space book, and all that. You might actually then don't have too many, like say have 10 at the most, all right, at the most. And then that's one thing you might want to do at a share, all right, before. You might want to bring that basket of books to your meeting. You might want to like pass them around, let them look at it and say, a big word that I used was inspire a lot. And then we talked about what to inspire meant, and I said, here are some books that might inspire you or give you ideas for things. Like maybe hold up the space book, all right, that has like a rocket ship and a space city. What might this give you an idea for building? What might you think about for this? And the same thing with the farm book, with the, with the zoo book, with the book of the city, of city buildings, and it's sometimes, it doesn't have to be a children's book. If you can find like a book that has just pictures of the city, just a picture book that's for adults, for anyone, with pictures of it, that's great for kids to look at. Another thing that I had, I don't think I put it in here, is I am a big collector of postcards, like if I go to museums, if I go someplace, I collect postcards, and I would, in different centers, I would put out little basket of postcards that the kids could look through. So the postcards would have pictures also that were like interesting to look at, that gave ideas. So the idea is, the thought isn't to copy. I never said that to them, but just to kind of get your mind working, to get you to think about some things that you might want to want to build, and do a lot of sharing. When kids do something, do sharing of it, so that it helps other children get ideas for that. Any other ideas? Any other questions or thoughts? That was a good question. Thank you. Okay, I'll go on. So safety, all right, the safety issue, all right. That is so personal, you know. I mean, I think there are some bottom lines, you know. You can't throw the blocks, you know, that's just out of the question. You can't throw it. And you talk about why you can't throw the blocks, you know, have a discussion about it, about why you can't throw the blocks. That's the biggest safety one, I think, is the throwing of the blocks, because little kids don't get that at the beginning. The other thing that I had was the walking on blocks, not to walk on blocks, because it, and not to tell them not to, but to talk about why do you think that might be something we should be careful about. You know, that could, you know, to talk about the reasons for it, so that, you know, you have a discussion about the reasons. And also the big thing is about how to take down the structure. And when you do the group building, that's really when you could start talking about that, like taking it from the top down. Because what's, you know, like what'll happen if you take it from the bottom? Well, what'll happen is the most fun, probably, you know, like, wow, they like the crash of it, but somebody could really get hurt. And also the noise is not good for other children in the class. It's not fair that other children have to hear those crashing sounds, you know. Is that an issue in any of your classes? So, yeah. So the other thing is, like, how high can we build? And that's the real personal one. I think that's really personal. I mean, like when I went to Italy in Reggio Emilia, the kids could literally take a ladder over, stand up on a ladder and build. They were fine with it. You know, they were absolutely fine with that. I think I would have gotten in real big trouble if I did something like that in my classroom. Sometimes I let them stand up on a chair if they wanted to get something higher. At the beginning, I said that they should build as high as they could reach, but then their buildings were getting so much more intricate that, you know, I said that they could stand up on a chair if they were very careful about it. But that's also, that's you know, that's really up to you, like what your comfort level is. Bethany, what do you feel about that? How do you feel in terms of height?
Yeah, I feel like, well, I'm speaking from Melissa's perspective because it's the same kindergartens that I work with. I mean, obviously she works with the most, but just knowing her group, I think safety is probably one of the number one concerns in there, Melissa. They're pretty rambunctious and have a lot of personality. So, and that's something that Melissa's really trying to hone in and use to her advantage. But I think safety is probably, especially with big blocks and stuff, a pretty big concern, right, Melissa?
Yeah, I haven't seen them like throw.
No.
Like, you know, they're just active kids.
Right.
How do I feel? I feel like the higher the better.
Yeah.
If you want to take a chair, go for it.
And do you have enough room there to have a nice size block?
I do, but like the configuration of my room is really strange because it's like two separate rooms and it's divided by a wall and like a small door, and like I can't.
It used to be two kindergarten classrooms, but now it's one with just a doorway between them.
So if I'm in like one classroom, I can't see. There's no sight lines to see what's happening.
That's so strange. Yeah.
It is, yeah. So like I had both rooms opened, but I had to like kind of switch it up a bit because I just couldn't see, like here, you know, even see, like I'm fine with the kids, you know, engaged in choice time playing, but I need to be able to see them, you know. If I can't see what's going on, then I kind of have to, so I kind of made one room a choice room and the other room is like for our meetings and
right. I think in terms of our like safety from admin's perspective, we're fortunate to have David, who is very like gung-ho about it all. So he probably also encourage a ladder. Like, wouldn't even shock me if that's something.
No, he would go get me one if I needed one.
Yeah, but I think the plan is to knock that wall down to, of course, help with the safety of that all, right?
Right. I know when my daughter was in first grade, she went to school in Peterborough, New Hampshire. Like the
Mhm.
six, we moved that year from Italy to back to the States, and so for part of the year she went to school in Peterborough, and they every classroom, and especially I don't know about the upper grades. Well, it only went up to fourth grade the school, but I know the first grade, kindergarten, every classroom had two rooms. All right, a quiet room and a noisy room. Okay,
Yep.
that's how her teacher talked about it,
Yeah.
but it was a window in between the two rooms. So so you could always see what was going on from one room to the other.
Yeah.
And so, like, some children would be in the noisy room, like building or painting and doing things, while other kids would be in the quieter room doing writing or I can't
I
remember.
like that way of splitting it. That would be if we could get a window or the wall gone completely or
Yeah.
whatever, maybe compromise with the window. That would might be a good way to do it.
I think so. I think so. I think there's something that's a big thing in Reggio Emilia, the idea of transparency.
Yeah.
And I really like that a lot. The idea that you can, see this is school that I did some work in New York. They're actually closing their school, but it's called the Blue School. All right, it's a private school,
Mhm.
and they were very influenced by the schools in Reggio Emilia when they created this school, and so all of their rooms have they have like windows, not walls, going through. But unfortunately, I don't know whoever designed it. I don't know where their head was, but the rooms are so small that they're ridiculously small.
Yeah.
So why build a new school like that? I can't quite understand. But they did have that transparency where you could kind of see from one one to the other. Um, so um, yeah. So anyway, so you have to kind of have some bottom line. What you consider safe in your room, and the children have to understand that, and they have to have discussions about it. Um, Cleaning up, that's a whole other thing too. I mean, kids love taking out all the blocks, but then there's that chore of cleaning up the blocks. And so there's just all different ways to go about doing it. I mean, you could have like like when you have class jobs, you could have a cleanup squad, block cleanup squad. But I think that well, first of all, once they start leaving their buildings up to go back to and add to, the blocks that are like strewn about the area that are not part of their building should be put away. Like their construction could stay up, but those other blocks should be put away. But there's different ways of doing it. I mean, my kids loved having like what do you call it? Like like a bucket brigade kind of thing. They loved that. They really loved doing that, like passing it from one to the other to the other to the other until like passing it this way, passing it this way. So that's what my kids liked. Then in another class that I saw, they had the teacher had milk crates, those plastic milk crates, and put a strap on it. And so they could put the blocks into the crate and like pull it over to the shelf where it went away, where it was put away. And that was fun to do that way. Another is to pick a shape, like to have cards with the different block shapes, and kids would just pick a shape, and that's the blocks that they would be putting away. And then, like then if there was more blocks there, and they pick another shape. So that's another way of doing it. But you have to really kind of have a some kind of structure, some kind of guidelines and structure. Otherwise, it can really get overwhelming. I also would stop the block builders a few minutes before everybody else had cleanup, so they had extra time to clean up, because that's really, they did have so many things to put away. And I didn't want it just like thrown in any old place, so that was another thing. All right. I'm trying to look through here to see. Any questions so far? Any thoughts so far?
Renee, Sorry, I was late. I had to go for a vaccine. Um, in my class, what I do is the kids have a very set cleanup. And usually the first week of school, I teach them how to clean up everything so that they know where things go and how it should look after and things like that. And since I've been doing choice time, if like I sectioned off areas of my classroom so that they can keep things the way they're using it and building it,
Right.
but everything that's not included in what they're building gets put away, kind of like what you were saying. And
Right.
they kind of, love the flexibility of being able to keep, because like right now, even though it's the block area and I have a separate imaginary play area, I had some books in storage on top of a shelf down there, and they've discovered them. And so they've taken the craft stuff and the books and they've made a library and a craft area. So I allowed them to keep it all there, and so that's been an ongoing theme in the block area. But I don't know if that helps any, that, give anybody a suggestion for something.
Yeah, I would, like when you say something like this that's really special in your classroom, it could be great if you could take some photographs and
Oh, yes.
and put them in that Google Share,
Mhm.
because yeah, definitely. Bill Fulbrecht, who is a friend of mine who taught kindergarten at the same school as me, um, his kids got really interested in, well, first in their reading nook. All right, the reading nook somehow became like they were selling books. All right, so he noticed them doing that, selling books, and so he brought it to the class and talked about bookstores, and if anybody had ever been to a bookstore, and we have a local bookstore that I don't think they have it anymore, but they used to have a cafe in the bookstore. And so he took them to the bookstore and they saw the cafe there, and they wanted to build it, but they wanted to build it in the book nook, where the books were. And so he made this suggestion about how about if we build it in the block center, and you could bring the books into the block center. And that's what they ended up doing. So they built like a little bookstore in the block center, and then they had a cafe there. And it went on for quite a while, this construction that they were doing. And yeah, and he is the teacher who, I think I'd mentioned this before, who he wanted to have a bigger block center, but there wasn't enough room to stretch out the block center. And so what he ended up doing was getting rid of the dramatic play and getting hollow blocks. And so the dramatic play was on the rug, but for this thing, the hollow blocks were moved in. The hollow blocks came into the block center because it became like block building and dramatic play all together. And that's the kind of thing we want to happen. We want that to happen,
Yes.
it's like it catches fire,
Well, it happened almost organically, like they just found stuff down there and they just went with it, right?
right.
I wanted to
Yeah.
mention too, me and Melissa visited Kim's class, like who's talking. And when she did the cleanup, like she had a song that she played and the kids knew, like she didn't even say anything. The song came on, they all cleaned up. And like by the time the song was over, they were ready for her to talk. And I thought it was so cool. It's a good idea.
What song do you put on? Just any song?
No, there's a cleanup song on YouTube, and that's what it's called, cleanup song. And
Oh.
I've played it for years,
Is it
and
like
they love it.
clean up, everybody clean
Yes,
up?
that's it.
Right? Yeah, we had, this wasn't just for the blocks, but there's a Woody Guthrie song. I dropped my block, pick it up, drop my block, pick it up, drop my block, put it back on the shelf. And so we do it for everything. We go around the room and drop this and drop that
Yeah,
and all that. Yeah.
yeah, they love it.
But yeah, no, but it's music is, yeah.
Yeah, Melissa puts on like Mission Impossible in her room, and the kids all, as soon as that comes on, they started cleaning up too, and they all got so hyped for cleaning because it's Mission
These tricks are very important.
I'm going to step in for one moment. All I can say is that, in my opinion, there is. All right. So when I was a youngster, we listened to Jack and Jill. They went up the hill.
Mhm.
Right. And what I'm seeing right now, there's a lot of screen time out there that, we're really trying to avoid. So that's one thing that is really catching my eye. So oral language is so very important. Rhyme and rhythm is the essence behind learning to read.
Mhm.
That's one thing I'm struggling with the most is screen time. If I could shut down internet and kill every Google Meet link, I would, because it gets a bit tangly. Jack Hartman is killing me right now. Just my opinion. So screen time is too much. I'll throw that out there. Oral language, I completely agree with,
Yes.
but screen time kills me.
Actually, I don't even put the video on the screen. Like,
Great, Kim.
they just do the song, like they just listen to the song. I don't even put it up for them.
Right.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
like the Mission Impossible one is just a timer that like counts down the time, but it's no like video or anything.
No.
No.
Yeah, but I agree with the screen time. I have big issue with it as
But,
well.
but my question is how do we combat that? Because it's becoming so very prevalent. Everyone wants to flip on the stupid screen time. Pardon me for saying that. And I'm
Yeah.
like, how do I kill it?
Yeah.
I know it's an ongoing challenge.
Yeah.
Well-
I had I did a blog post once. I think it was called Sing Out or Sing It Out or something like that. And it was about singing because I know in my class we did singing all the time. We did so much singing, so much singing. And so the blog post, you should look it up, or I'll send you. I'll have to look for it on. But it part of it is like all the different so much that children learn from singing, so much that they learn from singing. And I just spoke to a teacher about this last week, a kindergarten teacher who, she's trying to do all of this phonics and all that. I said, like sing with them, sing with them, clap with them, clap rhythms with them, tap with them, and there's and the singing it wasn't always like children's songs, like a favorite song in my class was Blue Skies, and then if it was raining and it stopped raining, somebody would say we have to sing Blue Skies, and so we'd sing Blue Skies. Or I had by the end, I had my kids for 2 years generally, all right. And so by the end of 2 years, we had this list, like went all the way down of all the different songs and chants also. A lot of, I learned this from my friend Connie, a lot of Irish chants, all right? And chants that we had. And June, every June, what I would do is I would start taping the children singing. Each day, different children would pick different songs for us to sing and tape. And this is how long ago I was. We had cassette tape, right? So now I don't even know how you do it now, but I'm sure it's a better way. But I would tape it, and then I would, for the end of the year gift for my class, I made a copy of the tape for all the children, plus a songbook that accompanied with all the words to all the songs that were on the tape. And what was interesting is, like, for years now, I live right across the street from the school where I taught. For years, I would meet like parents or the kids or whatever, and they would say that they listened to the tape on their way to the country, or they listen, like they still have their tape, and some of them are like in their 20s, and they, now I don't even think they could play the tape. How could you play a tape? Nobody plays tapes anymore, but I have some of it. Actually, I recorded some of it onto my computer because I like listening to them singing, But it never occurred to me to like use a record, or like we sang. I have the worst voice ever, but I would close the door and the kids didn't mind it. There was actually just one song where I used a record for them to learn this. And it was a book that they had. So I did this big bridge study. They were building bridges like crazy in my classroom. And we did the bridge study over the course of the whole year. We went in and out of it, but it was something we did over the course of the whole year. So by the end of the year, we started talking, I brought this up, the bridge as a metaphor, all right? Use the use of bridge as a metaphor. Like, can you think of a bridge that doesn't have wood or steel, and they came up with such interesting things. Nils said one year, a kiss is like a bridge because the two lips come together like a bridge. Another one, a rainbow is a bridge in the sky. So they came up with all of these different things. So then I was in the bookstore, I think at Bank Street actually, and I saw this book, Love Can Build a Bridge, and it was Naomi, what's her name? The singer. There's a family of singers. She died. She can, do you know what I mean?
Maybe Watts or something.
Yes.
Not Watts. No, that's the actress. Was it?
No, not Naomi Watts, but Naomi Judd. Okay. And it was Love Can Build a Bridge. And so it was a story, like, the song was like presented as a story. And then at the back of the book was the tape of Love Can Build a Bridge. And they loved it, And so by the time they learned it, it was like they were singing it from their hearts, Love Can Build a Bridge, and it was just such a heartfelt song. But usually I didn't use that. And that was a whole discussion on my blog, actually. People were writing about, well, I used I used a tape recording, or I put it on the smart board or something like that. And I actually took issue with that. And I thought, why do you need that? And also I'm getting away from blocks, I'm sorry, but I just feel like singing is so important. And what I would do with the songs is, like, let's say, I'm trying to think, the song Freight Train, or whatever it was, it's a song that we learned, all right? So we would just sing it, all right? I wouldn't have the words there or anything. We would just sing it. And when I felt like everybody knew that song by heart, inside and out, I put it on a chart, all right? Because then they could start making connections, all right? Like, we're going to sing it, and somebody was going to point to it as we sang. But before we do it, can somebody find the word that says train? Let's think about it. How would we figure out the word train? And then come up and make a circle around it. So I said, whenever we get to that point, it's going to say train, because Jeanette put a circle around all the places where the word train is. But I wouldn't use a chart until they knew the song inside and out, because then the words made sense to them. Then the words on the page started to make sense to them. And then it became a really wonderful shared reading experience, shared singing, shared reading. But I should get back to blocks, right? So children who don't go to the blocks, all right, often, I actually, it's not as much now, but when I was teaching, a lot of times the girls did not go as often as the boys to the blocks. But if I would get a basket full of dollhouse furniture and put it in the block area and tell them, show it at meeting and all that, say it's there. So like somebody might want to build some home that they could furnish with this, more girls would go into the block area, and then they would become more comfortable in the block area. So you kind of have to think about, you have a child who's in the block area who never goes to the art area, so you bring art materials into the block area to help them add things to their houses or to their cities. And then they become more comfortable with those materials, and then they might start going to the art area. Or when if you say one day you've gone to the block area 4 days in a row, now tomorrow we need to let somebody else have a chance there. But you were doing you were making all these trees and blah, blah, blah for your buildings. You might want to go and make some things for the block area at the art table, and then we could put it in a basket and put it in the block area. So you kind of have to think about what's going to help get kids different places. I showed you, I think when I showed you the PowerPoint, I showed you children signing up to stay in the block area for a week to work on something together, all right? But this is not something that I would do at the beginning of the year, all right? At the beginning of the year, I want them just to build, and it'll work its way up to something more than one day. They'll be ready for it. But then at a certain point in the year, you might think they might be ready for it. It might be a little change in what you're doing, and you could talk to them about it. Like thinking it might be fun to have signups, and you could sign up to work with a group of children, and you could figure out together what you wanted to work on all week. You could spend the whole week working on it. And maybe children in the other centers might want to make something to add to your whatever it is that you're making. We could talk about it at meeting time. But I wouldn't do that at the beginning of the year. I wouldn't start out my year that way. All right. And I wouldn't tell children that they had to have a plan for what they're doing, but I might put out a whiteboard, or if I don't have a whiteboard, I would put out maybe a big pad and say, if you want to make a plan for yourself, sometimes architects do that, and maybe talk about that, when they're going to build something. It's there for you if you want to use it, so it's like suggestions. It's more of an invitation or a suggestion to do something, as opposed to, okay, everybody's going to start with a plan before they do any building. I sent you something, and I don't know if everybody downloaded it. Did you? We'll get this paper that I sent. Let's see now. I sent it so I'm going to try, and hopefully I don't mess up this time. I'll try to do it on the share screen. Okay. I think I put it out. Okay.
Is that the Architect of Play article you're talking about?
No, wasn't that interesting though, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Can you see this?
Yeah, that looks
Yes.
good.
Okay. So this is something that that I've been using with teachers, and the way I found this was in one of my trips to Reggio Emilia. There was a director of a school in Sweden who shared something like this, and I thought it was really interesting. And so basically what it is it's this template, all right, has just 3 columns, all right. The first column is what children are doing. The second column is what do you think about what they're doing, reflecting on it. And the third is if this is what they're doing and this is what you think about it, what's your next step? All right. Maybe it has to do with putting materials in, or a mini lesson that you're going to do, or something like that. So yeah. So the first part, is what my children are doing. That's the only writing that you do during choice time. That's it. All right. So you might spend 5 minutes observing the center, observing children in the center. You write down who's there, you write down maybe the date and what the center is. And then the best thing is if you could put a transcript down, because that really is the words of the children. If they're not saying anything, that's important to write also. Why aren't children interacting with each other? That's another important thing. But you do that for 5 minutes or so, and then put it aside. All right, that's it. And then when the children are not there later in the day, then you go back to this and read it. And then you think what am I learning by reading this? What am I learning about the center or about the children? It may be about the center, about what, like maybe there's the wrong materials there, or they need less materials and more materials. Or maybe it has to do with the idea that you need to like do some kind of modeling at meeting time about something connected with using words or working together. It depends on what it is, but this is something, this was a kindergarten teacher sent this to me. And so I thought I would share this with you. So there's Raymond, Eleanor, and Carl, okay? So Raymond was pointing to a picture of a castle that was up on the wall in the block center. And he said, I like the bottom of this castle. We could change it like this. Maybe it won't fall, because they had already made something and he wanted to change it. Eleanor said, yeah, but how can we change it? I don't want to take this down. I worked on it forever. Carl said, let's destroy it. He stands up, ready to knock over the blocks. Raymond, no, we don't have to change the whole thing. Let's just stop. What if we put big blocks around it? Carl, okay, I'll get the big blocks. And Eleanor, the wise one, says, be careful. Last time you knocked it down. Give me some of your blocks, I'll help you. Raymond, we might not need so many. Eleanor, yes, we do. The castle is big. When Carl puts the blocks near the castle, the structure starts to shake. Eleanor, oh no. And Carl starts laughing. This is awesome. It's gonna fall, it's gonna fall. Eleanor, no, make it stop. The blocks don't fall. Raymond, see, the big blocks are protecting the little blocks. Eleanor, that's not what happened. He just got lucky. All right. So that's what the teacher sent me. That was it. All right. So we're looking at that together. What do you make of this? What are some of your thoughts?
I mean, there's definitely some questions around what makes something stable. And, there could be a really interesting, revisiting that conversation with the children and saying, like, could we do this again? How do you think we could make something so that the blocks don't fall? Or how could we make something that's easy to fall, like easy to topple over? Could we tell the difference between the two? What do you think we would need? Something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
So using this, maybe talking to the children about it, and then getting that discussion started. All right, about it.
I feel like even just like using this observation like shows you a lot about the children. Like I don't know them obviously, but just hearing you say it and reading it, I feel like I could guess their personalities a little bit. And as a teacher, I mean, that can be so helpful when you're planning and moving forward, kind of getting to know your students, their personalities a little bit, like who likes to knock the castles down and who's really careful and logical and whatever,
Right. We all have a Carl, right?
Yeah.
Everybody has a Carl, and Carl, and there's some program on that I see on YouTube sometimes. It's for a British show called I'll have to tell you. It's about a family with 3 children, and there's one child who is Carl in that family.
I have a Carl. His name is George.
Yeah, we all had that, right? and Eleanor, she's like, she's already like, making, she knows, she's taking care of stuff there, But
Yeah.
Raymond came up with some solution.
Yeah.
And that could be also an interesting thing to talk about.
Like problem solving maybe, or like, even just the concept of problem solving in general.
Right.
Really good at that.
So if you were filling this in, some of the things you were saying, like your noticings would be here. And then in the last part, some of these ideas that you had, like Lauren's idea about stability and talking to the children about stability and about, problem solving, like what does it mean to problem solve,
It's kind of like creating foundation first when you're building. I think that's what the first child's getting, like, that's what he was probably pointing to in the
Mhm.
castle. You know?
Right, and the castle, right, right. Yeah, even just looking at pictures together and talking about what you notice in the pictures about how things are constructed, how they're made. Are there any things that are similar, similarities in every single building? You know, does every single building have something similar to, even if they have differences? But
Like that could even influence you, like for more pictures that you want to add or whatever, like you could take from their conversation. They're clearly interested in that. So maybe that's the types of things that could be added from here on out, but it's still kind of on that same like frame of mind, you know?
right. So, yeah, so I find this a very helpful template for writing down observations and using those observations in a practical way. There, and so in some of the classrooms where I've been working, we've made many copies of this template, put them on clipboards high up by each center, so that if you're in the art center, you just grab it. You can just grab it and you could, just, like do a quick observation and write things down and then get back to it at another time.
Would you be okay if I put the one you emailed out in our Google share so that we?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'll download it.
I'm very bad at doing that, Bethany.
Oh, that's okay. I'll go ahead and do it. I already downloaded it to do it. I just want to make sure it was cool.
Okay. No. You don't even have to ask me. Just do it. Yeah.
And I have a question too. So you would just spend, say, like one choice time at one center doing the observation, right? Like you wouldn't try to observe everything at once.
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
I mean, if you can get into, that's great. It shouldn't take you more than about 5 minutes or so to do it,
Do you ever, have you ever seen anyone set up like a video so you could like kind of watch and then rewatch the video to make the script?
I think it's a great idea. I haven't seen it. I haven't seen anybody do that.
I know for me, I feel like sometimes I might get lost in trying to transcribe and miss what's happening.
Yeah.
So I wonder, have you?
Audios I've seen,
Yeah.
not the video one, but audio. Something.
Oh yeah, that too. Yeah.
I think you probably all must know Vivian Gusson Paley and her writing. All right. I don't know if you, white teacher, you can't say you can't play. I can't remember all the name of it. She's somebody you should absolutely read. She's like quite incredible. And I had the wonderful opportunity of spending a week with her at Teachers College years ago in meetings with her, not just me, but a group of people. And she did something interesting. She said she would tape what children were saying and what she was saying with children. She would have these tapes, but she would only have one tape. Now, this is in the days of cassette tape, but she said she would only have one tape. And she only kept one tape for a particular reason, because she felt like if she had more than one tape, they would start piling up. And then it would be a real chore to start transcribing it. But if she only had one tape, then she could transcribe her tape and then start on with a new one. And so she had all of these different transcripts. And I thought that was really, really smart. I have a little vignette in here that I can remember so very well. It was on page 62 in the book. Block play as a way into children's emotional lives. It was such an amazing thing to watch. I had these two boys were in the block center, and Kylan was sitting cross-legged in the middle. I mean, I have different names here then, but Kylan was sitting cross-legged in the middle, and Lucan was building around him, like a structure around him, getting higher around him. And every once in a while, he would run over to the dramatic play area where we had different stuffed animals. He'd get a stuffed animal, come back and throw it into one of the openings in the slat. And he'd say, "Don't be afraid, you could play with this. Don't be afraid, you could play with this." And I could not for the life of me figure out what was going on. But what I found out later was that his father was in jail. And the mother had never told me that. And it's like he was thinking of a way to using the blocks to think of a way of comforting himself and his father. You know, things, you know, don't be afraid. There'll be a block, there'll be a stuffed animal here for you. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. So, you know, it was just something that really stuck in my head, you know. Some of the interventions here, I put down some interventions here, and I'm sure there are like so many things that you could probably think of, but this happens, the first one happens a lot in public school because there's after school classes that use the same classroom. And so the children would really work on a construction, come back the next day, and it was all knocked over, you know. And so we, you know, that's, you know, the first thing was I really had to empathize with them. You know, I understand why you're angry, you know, that, you know, you have the right to be angry, etc. Now let's try to problem solve and think of some ways that what we could do. You know, can we make signs up? Can we put a rope around there? Can we put chairs, something, whatever it was, but help them problem solve this. Children bumping into one another and knocking over structures, then talking with the class about maybe there's too many children there, like try to brainstorm with them. Why is this happening? Why is things getting people bumping into each other and knocking things over? And the last one, they're rebuilding the same thing in the block area, which does happen, especially in the beginning of the year. But that's when to like look at books together, maybe at all different things. Like I said, showed before, you know, with the, let me get rid of this. Let's see. I'm sorry. You know, to share books together, to maybe that's the time to add a big drawing paper or a whiteboard. In my class, in my school, we worked with Teachers College, and so the word revision was coming up in their writing workshop, and I was able to use it in the block workshop. We're revising, you know, you don't have to keep things the same all the time. You get new ideas, you want to change it. Show us how you revised your building, you know, how you changed it. So any thoughts, any questions? Let's see, I'm looking here.
Renee, I was going to go back to recording. Like I've done video recording. So for the group I've taught, mostly toddlers, 3s. I've done a 2-5 combo, and then I had 2nd grade. And so what was interesting about just recording them is I would go back and sit and watch it with them and ask them to talk to me about it. And that's when I would transcribe with them a little bit more, because I had what they said to me, but then they were sharing a little bit deeper about their thoughts. And even back to your block observation, you know, that might be something to put up and read with the kids, depending on how old they are. I mean, there's so many different ways that you could use that actually. Sure. But just even having them talk about the interactions they had with their friends, and they might share a little bit more, whether or not they're, you know, Carl saying, well, I was so excited I couldn't get my thoughts out, you know, like having the friends as a group talk about it, or the class.
Right. Yeah, no, I love your ideas, Stacy. You know, it makes me think of a little bit of what I've seen in videos of from China in Anji Play. You know,
yeah.
And we've been doing that for different things in Choice Time. You know, like not as much as I would like to, but you know, like, you know, videotaping something that took place and then sharing it at the meeting, and then asking the children to talk about it. What's going on here? You know,
I think some of you for kindergarten were talking about redesigning of classrooms. I think it's online. If not, Renee, I'll try to find it and send it your way. But Nanjing International did something really bold just before COVID, unfortunately, and they've never been able to go back and really use their facility the way they designed it. But it's completely open structure from 3s through 6. And so kindergarten is part of this. And they have something called campfires. So each classroom now is just, I'm not going to do it justice describing it, because you'd actually have to see the maps, but like there's these beautifully designed wood circular spaces, which would be maybe the home area where kids would come for circle time and gather, but they can wander and meander throughout this entire giant facility now. And the kindergarten spaces were similar to that. And it allowed them to have big block areas and other play spaces, true play spaces in their kindergarten, instead of having these just rectangle classrooms. But I'll try to find it online and send it off your way. But that might be something to even
Yeah, I would
consider
love to
about
see
how they
that.
design the spaces in
Absolutely.
there.
I'd love to see
Um,
that.
And they
Can you
still
share it with
have,
all of us?
what's that?
Can you share it with
Yeah,
everybody?
yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
I need to, I feel like I actually have the physical design somewhere because we went to see it just before we closed in China. I was in China for 8 years. And then COVID happened and they've never really
Yeah.
been
You
able
know,
to truly open again.
Ron, at some point, someday, would like you to speak a little bit about what it's like in the school in Taipei, you know?
I'm back in California actually now. I left international.
Right, but Ron is in Taiwan.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
I mean,
and I have no idea of what, you know, what school is like there.
yeah.
And so I would, you know, I would love to hear more about that.
Yeah.
But
And even the kindergarten, when I left my last school, they took the nursery classrooms that we had blown out the wall and done like a Jack and Jill type bathroom and passed through. Kindergarten, they had some remodeling again. So kindergarten ended up taking over those classrooms. And so they have a portable wall, but they actually they use still the nursery setup, like big
Right.
open space. So the kids could pass through. And part of that too was having kind of a noisy space and a quiet space throughout the day for certain things that they were
well,
doing.
I have a question for you about the kindergarten. All right. And then I think maybe it's getting late, so we call it, but I know in the States, all right, especially not just in the public schools, I think in, you know, a lot of the schools, there are many academic requirements in kindergarten. All right. There's writing, there's reading, there's phonics, there's math, there's, you know, there are many academic requirements. All right. Did they have that there? Because it didn't sound like it.
Yeah. Last year there were some dramatic changes because one of the ECE teachers moved into kindergarten and finally put some realistic expectations back in, because the person who was running kindergarten for the longest time, I mean, I have very strong opinions about it. And this year, there are 2 formally trained ECE teachers who've now taken on kindergarten. So there's way more play, but up until last year, it was so heavily academic. When I taught second grade, I was in the same wing as them, and it would break my heart because they would take recess away from them. They would be late for recess all the time. They heavily drove. We did workshop, readers and writers workshop, and they were heavily pushing a lot of that. And, you know, then the teachers would complain that the kids were out of control and wild. It was like, because you're asking them to do things that they're just not ready to do.
That's what I was talking about at the beginning.
For the ECE teachers, we were like, because these were our kids and we would watch them struggle.
Right. So yeah, I mean, this is a reality now. It's very difficult to avoid it. And so the idea is, how do we balance things in a way that is not harmful to young children? You know, I mean,
The other campus I worked at that has kindergarten as well was like that, I would say probably until the 2018 school year. And then they started to bridge up the PK teachers. A couple PK teachers who were credentialed to teach K moved up and started to push more play and like taking things down a notch. While I was there, I was their early years coordinator. So I was just working on taking away like the timer and choice time. They would ring a bell and I was like, oh. And so I tried to explain to the teachers there, because it was similar. They'd say, you know, these kids are out of control. They're the lowest kids we've ever had, the PKs who came up. And one day I just boldly at one of their meetings said, actually, you're completely developmentally inappropriate for the children we're sending to you. And I invited them to come over that spring, all the kindergarten teachers, to come to PK, to see how independent the children were, what they were doing, what they were working on. Only 2 of the 6 came. The others didn't think they had to come, but those 2 that came changed the way they operated in their classroom, because what they saw was these children are so independent in June when they leave school, and then they come back 6 weeks later and we're like so regimented and they have zero autonomy. And that's why they were rebelling against us, is because they had just spent 3 years in this environment where they were in control of the classroom and in control of their bodies and, made choices for themselves. And then they were put in this very restrictive environment. So it's evolved. And I would say that campus has made tremendous steps, but it's still very academic, and admin just, they don't want to hear it. It's very
Well,
academic.
I personally feel like I'm in a very emotional spot actually right now, because I am stopping my work. And I've been doing my work since 1968. So it's like, but I kind of felt like it's time for me to stop, and I'm trying to deal with it emotionally. And that's why I have a new blog post, which I think I sent you part of it, but but I don't want to I don't want to go into schools now. I don't want to do that work now. I don't want to tell teachers what they should be doing, shouldn't be doing, any of that stuff anymore, but I don't want to I don't want to leave. I wish there was a way that something could be written to present a viable alternative, and I keep thinking that I have a viable alternative, and that's why I got into that argument with this principal last week, because he wasn't buying it, well, to be discussed further. but it is a very emotional week for me, because I sort of a whole bunch of things have added up to it, and yeah.
I have a question, like, Stacey, maybe you can contribute to this, but have you ever had like questions, not necessarily pushback, but like questions from like parents? Like, that's something that I think is happening a little bit in our school. It's like, well, when my kid did kindergarten, like the sibling of whoever, like they had this brought home and they did this in school and whatever. And it's really hard to know like how to respond, and our admin fully supports play-based, like very good for that. But like the parents is a whole different thing.
Yeah, we did. We had it in the ECE. So I was brought in to make ECE play-based. It was very academic. We had an ECE, and I had one teacher that was a lone holdout. And she was sharing, the parents are saying this and they're saying this because the previous siblings had these other experiences. And I said, well, respond that what you guys were doing was developmentally inappropriate. And we've done some reflection, and now this is where we've moved. And she was like, oh, and I said, yeah, we're going to have to admit as an organization, what we were doing was not appropriate. And we did more parent education. I got a little pushback when I taught second grade, same thing, because I was involving more choice time and play, but none of my children were behind at the end of the school year. They just weren't ready. And so I really I approached it from the very beginning in that class to parents is that, and again, we were post-COVID in China, so that we were locked down the 2020 school year for 18 weeks or something. And I said, so I was getting really young second graders. And I said, we're going to focus on social emotional first and building community. And we're going to move fast and slow and fast and slow. So, we're really going to be focusing more on where your child is developmentally. And that's where we're going to go academically. And they'll be okay, but yeah, we did. And part of that is the community we were serving. Highly educated Native Chinese, that education was extremely important to them, but also working with highly educated international managers from all over the world, paying for this expensive international school. So I think we just had to have as a school, we had to have a reckoning as to where we were at and believe what we were saying and demonstrate and show. And we were starting to do that. And then again, schools closed. We didn't have as much open access for families to come in and see the learning and for teachers to explain it. So we used to do student-led conferences, and our goal pre-COVID was this time around, we were going to have parents come in small groups, and we were going to do an education session about things we wanted them to look for when they went in the classroom. And then they would go in to the student-led conference and observe and see how the class was operating, and then come back with the teachers and talk about what they saw. And we could share a little bit more about the child development and the learning. We were doing that through Seesaw and other platforms. We were really pushing what children were learning in all of our documentation. But yeah, we still push back. I mean, I just got a video of a kid. She just turned 3, and her mom sent me this video of her reading, and I just sighed.
Yeah.
You know,
We should talk more about this.
Still
So
is up here in Canada. too.
sorry.
I also want to talk another time about how class inquiry studies can bridge a lot of this, a lot of all of this, you know. And so I want to try to find time to speak with you about that, because that's, if I do write, that's what I'm going to write about, because I feel like that's very exciting. Anyway, I think until next week, right?
I just want to share what Ron wrote in the group that he had to go, but he said, what I'd like to say to parents who compare to other kindergarten experiences is to point out that with emergent curriculum, without the jargon, we'll have different experiences, but it's all meaningful, and we will still work on moving children along a developmental continuum that makes sense. And it just looks different every year. And I think that's a really
Very well worded.
cool way of putting it all together.
Absolutely, absolutely. I want to hear more from him. I have a feeling.
I
he's
know,
gonna-
it's too bad he had to go. And I think David will contribute to this conversation too
Yeah.
a bit next week, but
save
So-
that quote. I think that's a really nice quote to save.
I'll
Yes,
just,
and in the
maybe I'll put
chat.
it- maybe I'll start a document like in the
Yeah.
share and just like.
that's
Yeah, because I don't know how to do that, Bethany. I'm sorry.
I could even
That
just
would be a
try
great
it. I tried.
simple language if he's willing to share it with people, because you just have to be proactive, I think, and say, like, I can hear that you're nervous. I can see that you're nervous, and let me help you understand a little bit more what we're doing.
Right.
I always found the night, curriculum night, when we kind of introduce the parents and, you know, to the curriculum and things like that at the beginning of the year. Bethany, you would know about this,
Mhm.
what we call curriculum night.
Yeah.
I always found that it was then that I shared my philosophy of how I ran my classroom and what they would expect to see and not see, and how I kind of, you know, based the children's learning on what my philosophy was, and how they would see play-based, and they wouldn't come home with paper and pencil things and stuff like that. So I found that was a great night to kind of set the standard for what the parents would expect throughout the year.
That's very,
Yeah,
this
I
is
know
definitely
people
something we need
don't-
to talk about more, right?
I was gonna say,
Yeah.
I feel like
This
everyone's
is-
leaving and stuff, but it's something that we could talk about forever, probably.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm going to say good night, because I know you guys have had very long days.
Okay. Good night. Thank
So
you.
Have a good week,
Bye.
and I'll see you
Thanks.
next Tuesday, okay?
Thanks, Renee.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.